fucking home. I like my rock and roll the same. Don't give a fuck if I burn out. Don't give a fuck if I fade away. Back to the Motor League with me.
You're listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda, hosted by two teachers who break down a different propaganda song each episode. Today, we're talking about Back to the Motor League, track 4 from the third full-length LP, Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes. This came out in February of 2001 on Fat Records. And Keith, you may not have thought about this, but this is our first episode about a song on the record, Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes. And I don't know about you, but I feel a little bit of pressure. Do you feel any pressure to talk about this record like more than other records, or am I just like projecting?
No, for sure, because when I scroll through social media, this is the album that people have on display, that they have a picture of, they're making reference to. So this seems like definitely a fan favorite. And we're starting with one of, if not the biggest songs from the release. So definitely a lot of pressure.
Yeah, this is like the record that entirely changed everything for me as far as being a fan of this band. I had the other records before this, but then songs started showing up on like Napster file sharing sites in like late 2000, I think. I think the first song I actually heard was Bullshit Politicians. And then I heard Back to the Motor League. And then I think I also heard, what else did I hear? There was another one that I heard off this record as well and then I just started trying to find these songs from this new record on Napster. And they were coming through and I was like, how is this even the same band? And I know that I wasn't alone in thinking like that about these songs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. And a lot of the conversations I've tried to have with people on social media so far is reminding and clarifying that this is the first record I heard. So my idea of the band kind of starts here. It doesn't begin with How to Clean Everything or with Less Talk, which are immensely important albums to countless people, but they just weren't as important to me because that's not what I heard first.
Yeah. And, I definitely feel a huge sense of affinity for this record more than those first two records as well, because this is when I sort of started trying to be an intelligent person who tried to care about the world, who tried to understand difficult and complex ideas. So I sincerely connect this record to a phase of my life where I decided I'm going to actually try and read long books. Do you know what I mean? Like I was a complete dummy, and this was something that really helped me break out of, just my high school ordinary banal life where I would work at Party City and fill party balloons or like go to swim practice or like water polo or like go to my friend's house on the weekend. So I associate this record with like sort of an intellectual breakthrough for myself. And so this is one of the major reasons why I gravitate to this one a little bit more, because my brain was sort of ready for this. And all these like ideas that are hard and complex are all over the first two records as well. But like my brain wasn't ready for it. My brain at that time was ready for like fast skate punk and, mosh pits at Creepy Crawl or Mississippi Nights or High Point or something like that in St. Louis. It wasn't ready for like the content.
Oh, for sure. Because I was a sophomore in college when I heard this. So my bubble was being burst. I had moved away from home. I was in a different community around a lot of different people that I hadn't met before, experiencing and learning new ideas and theories that challenged what I had been taught in school or brought up to believe. So this kind of sneaking into my lineup at that time definitely also matches like a pivotal point in my life when I started, volunteering more, reading, not just because of school, because of personal interest and personal betterment. For sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Can you tell us a little bit about Todd Kowalski and his entrance into the band in 1997? This is their first record with Todd. Tell us about Todd. What'd you find out?
Todd is on bass here, and he really brings out a new era in the band. I mean, I can't imagine what it would have been like to have How to Clean Everything and Less Talk playing in home or in my car for years, and then to hear this new iteration of the band. I didn't have that jarring pivot away or that severing of sound and style. Everyone listening will know this most likely, but Todd was the singer and guitarist of I Spy, a hardcore punk band from Regina, which was originally called Clump. What a great name. They did a split CD 10-inch with Propaganda, and I Spy played together until the summer of 1996 when they decided to call it quits.
I'm really glad that you pronounced Regina correctly. You know, growing up in the United States, it is not a completely obvious pronunciation. So well done to you. And I know that the Canadian listeners out there will appreciate that as well.
I only know that because I listened to a podcast interview with Todd before.
Awesome. Well, I lived in Saskatchewan for 2 years. And so, Regina is a place that is very well known to me. And so it's one of the first things that you will learn if you move or lived in Saskatchewan from elsewhere is the proper pronunciation of Regina, the capital of the province of Saskatchewan. So something else I learned about Todd is that he also was in like another band who might have been kind of like a grindcore sounding band called Swallowing Shit. And they had like a 7-inch and an anthology CD as well. So I learned that about Todd too.
Yeah, I remember having some of their songs on a compilation, but I didn't realize he was in that band.
When did he join Propaganda?
So he joined in 1997 and also played bass for J Church on their 1997 Japanese tour.
Interesting. Okay. I think there's some story about J Church in Japan and Propaganda that we may have to dig into in a different episode. I know there's some footage out there of Propaganda playing a little bit with J Church in Japan. So that's something that we'll dig into another time, but I heard about that from a listener. And I must say really quick that I love the people who send us comments and ideas about this band. So many of you know so many incredible things and overlooked trivia, like things that we would never know. And like, just because we're doing this show, like we're still learning all these things just like everybody. So like your comments are so rad, like beyond rad. So we're just super grateful to everybody out there. Okay, so we're in the Todd Kowalski era of this band now. Another thing that I should point out to everybody is that in 98, G7 Records released the I Spy anthology called Perversity is Spreading. It's About Time. And my favorite tracks on that record, by the way, are Seamus's Nuts and More Than a Joke. Those are great. The whole record is insanely awesome. And so today Todd plays bass for Propaganda, and he's been on their last 5 records, Empires, Potemkin, Supporting Cast, Failed States, and Victory Lap. So to me, like, this is such a pivotal moment, today's Empire, Tomorrow's Ashes, and all of Todd's thrashy and hardcore sounds prior to Propaganda was like the perfect blend of syncretism that allowed Chris and Jord to bring out the metal aspects of their past. And, Chris telling the story on his podcast about he and John K. Sampson not being able to see eye to eye on a song they were covering, this is like the next step from that. And it's just perfect. So we come into this new era of Propaganda. So we're going to be talking about Back to the Motor League today. I know that we have a super special guest. Keith, tell us about our guest this week.
So our guest is John Darnielle from the Mountain Goats. When Greg and I first started planning this project, I jokingly put him in our notes as my dream guest. And the fact that he said yes is kind of a big deal. And it was really, really awesome to talk to him.
We're going to go to our conversation that we recorded recently with John Darnielle from the Mountain Goats. And I also have to say, we recorded this on the phone, so it sounds like a phone call. But also, if you are a reader and you like novels, which I hope most of you do, you should consider checking out John's 2 novels, Wolf in White Van and also Universal Harvester. They're just amazing. Have you read any of John's work?
I read both of those, and they're incredibly challenging. I think they're 2 of the most challenging novels I've read in a really long time.
Yeah, and they're absolutely wonderful. And I'm not going to talk about those books. You should listen to John's interviews on his books, on other podcasts, on other like radio segments. But anyway, let's go to our chat with John Darnielle from the Mountain Goats, talking about Back to the Motor League and his love of Propaganda.
Shotguns and single fence and wieners circling straight edge. Fuck off, who cares?
John Darnielle, songwriter for the Mountain Goats and author of Universal Harvester and Wolf and White Van. Welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
Hey, how's it going?
So, John, how did you find propaganda, and how did you come to realize that they were special? Maybe like the first album, the first song that you heard.
So I should warn you that my answers to things tend to be extremely long, but I do stay focused. So here's what happened. I was living in, well, let me do punk history first, right? So I was not a punk in high school, but there were a fair number of punks in my high school, especially what do you call the second wave, I guess? People who are into Discharge, right? When Discharge comes out in my town of Claremont, lots of kids get super into Discharge and they get Liberty spikes and wear leather jackets. All the Crass stuff, all the Anarchy for U2 stuff, that stuff was all big in Claremont. There were a lot of kids, 13, 14-year-old kids, generation after me, right? When I'm 16 or 17, these kids are like really discharging it up. Listen to, God, what else? Rudimentary Peni, all that kind of stuff, right? And it was around. I was aware of it. But I was listening to goth music, and lines were kind of hard between sub-scenes, it seemed to me. Like if you were listening to this kind of underground music, you only dabbled in the other, metal and punk sort of in 86 or so really do start to collide in a really fruitful way. But I'm talking about 84-ish here, 85. So, but in college, I went back to school in 91, right? And at that point, my musical perspective has broadened a lot. And I was buying Maximum Rock and Roll. And it was a really exciting time in punk and hardcore. I mean, I know hardcore is a loaded word, but in the general broader punk scene, a lot of interesting stuff going on, especially coming off of Gravity Records in San Diego, and stuff like Born Against, right? Man is the Bastard was from my town, right? So Power Violence is going on. And I started really engaging this stuff, right? I would go to Man is the Bastard shows. Born Against, I totally idolized. I thought they were amazing. So that's the scene set for when I moved to the Midwest in 95, right? By 96, I'm in Iowa, and my girlfriend, who's now my wife, had a show on KDIC, which is Grinnell Radio, right, in Grinnell, Iowa.
Awesome.
And around her second or third year there, they were having prospective students are touring the campus and are coming through the radio station to see, and it's one of the things that a prospective student might see and might pick the college if they have a cool radio station, right? So a kid named Ben, who we're still friends with, like 25 years later, and who actually now lives in Durham, which is crazy, right? But a kid named Ben Coakley was touring, and I asked, and I was with her, and I said, "What are you listening to?" So I may listen to punk. I said, "Like who?" And he says, "Propaganda." I had never heard them before, right? I was sort of at this point checked out. The Mountain Goats are kind of going on, and I'm way more attuned to indie rock, and I'm getting more into metal at this point. But he said Propaganda so instantly, right? He said, "Oh, this is Propaganda." I said, "Oh, really? Oh, cool. I hadn't even thought of them." And I fished Less Talk from the bins to put it on. He already knew the word. And so it would have been that first song of Apparently I'm a PC Fascist, right?
Yeah.
Just popped. And I was a fairly recent vegetarian at that time. So I was like, okay, I think I'm ready for this. Right? And we got super into it. I started ordering stuff from MRR. I got the what label was it that put out the double 7-inch that was on like brown wax?
Oh, Recess.
Yeah, I ordered that. I actually ordered a VHS of them live in Missouri. And it was great because, like I say, I'm from Claremont. I'd seen Man is the Bastard a lot. Man is the Bastard, along with Propaganda, were sort of part of the vanguard of bands whose banter between the songs were longer than the songs themselves. And yeah, so that was when we got into it. Of course, Less Talk, I mean, that was just we went and got How to Clean Everything other stuff, but Less Talk, for me, was just a giant moment in time. It was like, so we listened to it all the time. The hooks were so great. And it was right, we were right squarely in its political zone, just on the same page,
Nice. What year was that again?
That would have been, I want to say, 96 or 97. I'm not sure when the record comes out, but it would have been, I moved to Grinnell in 96, and I'm there until I think just 97. I forget, but it's hard to keep a beat on the years as they pass.
Yeah. Well, and so like whenever I reached out to you about doing this show, you didn't select a song from Less Talk More Rock. Whenever I said, "Hey John, what's a song from Propaganda that jumps out to you so much that you would want to talk about in detail?" You mentioned Back to the Motor League, which comes out in 2001, so a few years after you found the band. Why'd you pick Back to the Motor League? What is it about that song and Today's Empire is Tomorrow's Ashes that jumps out?
So how many records did they release between Less Talk and Back to the Motor Leagues?
0.
Not a fucking one, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and if you were into Less Talk in the mid late 90s, you were sitting there going, why is every shitty band releasing a record every 9 months, right? And touring, and I have to hear about them all fucking day. And this band who is really good puts out one record, and it's a fucking titan of a record. And they're kids when they make it, so you know it's good, right? It's like you got to have more in the chamber. You guys in your early 20s, right? And then crickets, like nothing. and it was like very, okay, well, I don't know what's going on with them. There was no way of really knowing. I mean, obviously there is. You could write to them, and they would probably tell you, but wasn't really doing a whole lot of that at that time. But then the internet is gradually, I mean, it already had existed, but we're just out ahead of high speed kilobit transfers are getting faster. And I forget whether it was, I think maybe we were on the G7 mailing list. I'm trying to think of how we get a hold of the track. But the thing is, they released that as an MP3. It preceded the album, right? And for us, for my wife and I, who was at this point working at Iowa State University, doing lab work in science, it was very exciting. It's like, there's a new Propaganda song. For me, it was especially exciting because it sounded pretty metallic. It was like I was getting more and more into heavy metal, and really at this point, they're starting to show their metal chops, right? The speed metal vibe is really coming through. And I mean, we just loved it so much, and it was so exciting. That was the first breath from Propaganda in 7 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a long one. So did that song just grab you right away by the throat?
Oh my God, it was so good. It was like, I mean, it's I think it'd be hard to imagine, just because the world is so much busier and there's so much more music available to you at all times, what it was like to wait for just the right thing from a band you like, right? It's like now, if a band goes away for a long time, I can fill my plate with other stuff in the waiting. I'll be stoked when they come back. But at that time, it was like, there's plenty of good music, never any shortage of good music, but it was an event. It was really quite exciting, and it still felt very personal. It was like, we'd never seen them live. We started to hope that they would tour. I don't think they did. I think they were in their not coming to North America phase, or not coming to the U.S. at that point. Got to sort of thing to slap you for it. They're in North America, but they weren't coming to the U.S. But yeah, it was like it was huge. The lyric was really good and clever and compressed in that Chris Hanna style. He's really good at compact phrases. His phrasing is sort of under-discussed. I think that's how good it is. He doesn't do the thing that 90% of lyric writers do, where you force a syllable to bear a stress that doesn't belong to it. The example I always use is, pronounce this word for me, W-I-N-T-E-R.
Winter?
That's right. And never winter, right? Ever, right? This is not how you say it. Winter is not a word at all, right? But lazy lyric writers, if they need to say winter and the rhythm falls wrong, they'll just say, this winter I went, and it sounds terrible, always sounds bad, right? And a good writer just doesn't do that, just gets around it, finds different ways. Chris Hanna is really good. It's really, really quite. His stuff spews out of him like it was something he was saying spontaneously, which for me is what poetry is like, it just sounds like you were just going to say that anyway, right? Except that it comes out as a fully formed expression. And he's really good at that. It was just such an exciting song. I mean, it's like, to this day, I'm not entirely sure what its subject matter is. It also feels like, it's about punk, right? But it sounds like it's got a lot of pent up expression, like they've been waiting a long time to get it coming, and so it just sort of lands.
So, John, thinking about like the rest of the music in the song, you said it being a little bit more metallic, really grabbing you. Is there anything else like musically that the song kind of that you find to be pretty special?
Well, one thing that it does is it's sort of making fun of it's making the kind of music that it's making fun of. It's got a very self-referential quality, right? So it's talking about, if I remember correctly, I should have done some research, but it's been a busy time. I haven't picked it up in a minute. Remember, it concerns the punk scene, right? And it concerns a sort of meathead mentality, the same sort of meathead mentality that likes to, the New York hardcore Lower East Side sort of feeling of like chanting lyrics and being sort of hulking bros, But it's making the kind of music that is very appealing to that exact audience while criticizing it, right? There's it is a scene politics song, which is really funny because everybody who hates scene politics likes to think they're above it. But if you're even talking about scene politics, then you're in the scene, right? But when it goes to the double drumming, the fist in the air part, right?
Yeah.
I think what it's doing is sort of trying to get you to buy in and then point a finger at you and ask you, why are you buying in? Which I think is pretty great.
And so Chris Hanna said of this album that he finds it to just like sonically not be very listenable. And as a result, he ranks it lower than Less Talk, More Rock because of just the audio quality, the guitar tones. What do you think about the mix? I mean, do you think it holds the record back?
Look, Sgt. Pepper is below Less Rock. Less Rock is like, you can't really be comparing shit to Less Rock. It's a moment in time. I don't agree at all. That compressed, I know it's so hard, but also when people are talking about their own work, they're hearing other things. Less Talk is really, it's so useful. It's so self-righteous in a way that is very satisfying. It's like if half the political claims made on that record could be disproven forever, it would still resonate. It would still feel like a very righteous cry. Whereas when you get a little older, then that righteousness has now gone missing for a much more complex mode of expression. Right? It's still angry, it's still protest essentially, but it's not nearly as sort of monomaniac. It's like it's much more detailed, right? It's much more complex, and so mix wise, I don't know. I mean, he can speak to that better than I can because I think usually it's only the artist who really understands what happens in mix and what things sounded like in the studio versus how they landed in mix. That's a whole thing that, like, I've sort of spent a lot of time and energy trying to get people to think about that kind of thing. Because mix and master can make such a gigantic difference in your record.
Absolutely.
Sequence, mix, and master, right? And people don't understand a mix can make all the difference, and especially since when you're in the studio, when you listen to the roughs, when they just bring up what you did and you listen to it in the studio monitors, these moments are incredibly exciting and inspiring. Like, you listen and you go, fuck, that sounds amazing. Oh, we did it, guys. Well, then it goes to mix, right? And in mix, it's not going to sound like that because that wouldn't sound good if you just bumped that mix down and released it. That mix is also a moment in time, right? That the studio mix that you're listening to as soon as you do it, it's just a rough thing so you can hear your parts. And you're in the excitement of the moment, and it's it's a whole. I'm trying to think of what it's like. I mean, it's like whenever you perform live, you often feel like you're doing pretty great because you feel great up there, right? Mm-hmm. But then you listen to a tape later, and you find out whether you did well or not, right? When you're listening to your mixes that are just brought up as soon as you're done, you're mainly hearing your energy, right? And mix can reveal a lot about what you actually did. Having said that, I don't know much about the Motor Leagues. To me, it was a pretty drum mix on that is good, in my opinion.
Nice. John, you mentioned a little bit about your interpretation of the song already. Do you have any particularly favorite lines? You mentioned Chris's prowess as a writer. Are there any lines that really just jump out at you about Motor League?
I don't have them in front of me. Read them.
Okay, so we have, I like to party fucking hard. I like my rock and roll the same. Don't give a fuck if I burn out.
Don't give a fuck if I burn out. Don't give a fuck if I fade away. Keep going.
Back to the Motor League with me before I'm forced to face the wrath of a well-heeled buying public who live vicariously through tortured artist, college rock, and four-punching macho pablum. Back to the Motor League I go. Once thought I drew a lucky hand, turned out to be a live grenade.
Yeah. Keep going.
Okay. Let's see. Play acting anarchists and mommy's little skinheads, death threats and sycophants and wieners drunk on straight edge. Fuck off. Who cares? I'd rather highlight triptychs than listen to your bullshit. Fuck off. Who cares about your stupid scenes, your shitty zines, the straw men you build up to burn? Never ceases to amaze. As I'm suffering your perfection, it reminds me of my own race, to redress my own sad history of mouthed feet, eaten hats, teated bowls, Amish phone books, drunken brawls. And what have we here? 15 years later, it still reeks of swill and chicken shit conformists, fists in the air, like father, like son, rebels bloated on corns, M&Ms, and biscuits. Lord, hear our prayer. Take back your Amy Grant Mosh Cruise, your fair weather politics. Blow dry my hair and stick me on a 10-speed back to the Motor League.
Back to the Motor League. Right.
Yep.
So there's so much in there, right? It's like this is very much an encapsulation of a lot of punk issues that have been going on since '82 at the latest, right?
Yeah.
Like the Amy Grant Mosh Cruise, right? You happen to be talking to probably the biggest Amy Grant fan in indie rock. Right? Like,
Tell me more.
I once flew out at the end of a very bad year. I flew out to Eastern Tennessee to see her live on the Lead Me On 20-year anniversary. She's an underrated artist. People don't. She's a symbol in that song, so they're not actually calling it Amy Grant. but the Amy Grant Mosh Cruise, like, this starts with straight edge, right? Where straight edge becomes pretty quickly a way of forming a clique, right? That is very exclusionary and that is very, that doesn't ask questions about what people's behavior might mean and where it might come from, the sort of militant veganism that turns people off, that does not in fact help any animals, where you just say either you do this or you're not on board. Well, that sort of veganism we all learn over time doesn't take into account what about people who were raised in food deserts, right? Which is a lot of fucking people. Mm-hmm. What about people, who grew up so poor that always dreamed of having enough to buy the food that was sold to them by consumer culture as good their whole lives? There's so many things that go into eating. So you don't just tell people exactly how to live. This is an Amy Grant Mosh Crew too, right? And I think when he talks about his self-criticism in there, I think he's growing, because we all know that the younger Chris Hanna was 100% the vegan who says, fuck you, stop eating meat, right?
Yeah.
Fuck you, stop eating dairy. And as he grows, I'm 100% certain that he comes to understand that approach doesn't help animals, doesn't help the issue, but it does feel good, and it's also part of your process, right? It's like that's what, with any of your radical politics, you're going to go through steps of process, and you're going to engage in a process of self-critique and of shame, when you go, oh, fuck, what an insufferable fucking dude I was. I wonder how many people I turned off to the very cause I was trying to convert them to. I know for me, when I first quit eating meat, I tell anybody who cared to listen to go fuck themselves. Stop eating meat, you fucking savage.
Yeah.
And now I don't do that. Now I live by example. So you come over to my house and I serve you some food and you say, fuck, that was delicious. I go, yeah, amazing, right? When I quit eating meat, I became a cook. And so,
nice.
That's something you learn over time. But all those little splinters in that, the bit about the M&Ms and biscuits, right? When he's talking about the new metal thing, which I know for anybody who'd been into punk and metal, that moment, if you were a little older, get pretty judgy about it and go, what shitty music this is. So, even though it's another thing. So this is during the high tide of new metal stuff, right? And I know most of us who had been into harder music, when new metal came along, we were like, what the fuck is this shit? This is just terrible. All these bands are awful, Stained, Limp Bizkit, Mudvayne, fucking, God, who's some more of them? Korn, all this shit, right? But that too was sort of narrow-minded. What are you going to ask? You're going to ask the younger generation, hey, listen to the stuff that we liked, right? Go listen to your Minor Threat and Bad Brains records. That's just Beatlesism. That's boomerism, to tell the younger generation, go listen to what I listened to, right? No, they're going to make their own shit, right? And their own shit, if it doesn't appeal to you, that's an opportunity for reflection on your part, right? Not just to say, this doesn't do for me what the music I loved when I was their age did, although I suspect if Chris were on the line, he'd say, look, that music is still bullshit. That's fine. But I mean, I think that's part of the whole thing in the song. I mean, there's a sense in which that's more narrator than speaker, where it's, that's something you go through, is alienation from the scene that comes after the one that radicalized you, right?
So, John, think about Chris Hanna's vocal delivery on this record. I mean, it varies wildly from the previous work, right? Yeah, and this is actually the first album I heard. So, yeah, what do you think about the vocal performance on this track or the rest of the album?
So I think he's confident, and what's interesting about that to me is, again, I don't know how much touring they did after. I'm sure they must have did a big Less Talk tour, but I feel like they've been off the road for a year or two when this happened. But one reason that major labels are used to always and still will in the future, right, take a band and go, okay, well, you're a new band, go hit the road, right, and send them out on these punishing tours, just months long, right, is the more you tour, the better you get. Like, that's just a fact, right? It will drive you crazy, right, and it makes you sort of socially incapable of living like normal people. But the one thing that you get good at is playing. Right, the more you tour, the more you play, the better you're going to be. Any jazz musician knows. Do 200 shows a night, and you will blow anybody off the stand. Or a year, you'll blow anybody off the stand. It's like, and that's how it is with any rock band. It's like the longer they go out, the less effort they have to put into just kicking ass. And it's why it's so funny when people like really are excited for the first night of tour. That's not going to be the best show of the tour at all. Right? Best show of the tour is 9 months later. Right. That's when the shows are like every single night, just great. My suspicion is that Hanna's vocals have been honed over playing live over and over. And it's a process that happens organically. You don't have to think about it. You sing and you notice what sounds good to you. And you notice this without having to articulate it. Like, you just hear your own self. Or if you're playing in shitty punk clubs, you hear maybe a little bit through the one crappy fucking Mackie monitor that they have in the entire VFW, right? So you're doing it every night, right? And you notice how the audience pops, right? It's a wrestling term, but an audience pops when they all get excited at the same time about the same moment, right? And you really do notice, right? You can't fail to notice. Like, for me, it used to be when I would hit a high note and hold it, I could just feel the whole room electrify, right? I'm not even a good singer, but it didn't matter. If I hit these high notes and hold them and it'd be clear, I could feel the hair on people's necks stand up.
Hell yeah, man!
Doing it more.
Absolutely.
And that's I'm certain that his phrasing and everything, he's noticed. Like, when I talk like this, they love it, right? And he may or may not be thinking that consciously, but it's very much a rat running through a maze response. Is like, you get a positive reaction and you want to do it some more.
Awesome. Well, John, something I'm curious about as well is you've been on the road forever in various incarnations of your band, and I'm curious if you have any like business, like life lessons and values you carry with you in the world as a person and a professional musician with the Mountain Goats that you might attribute to Propagandi's presence in your life, or like the values they espouse.
I'm trying to think. I mean, the thing is, like, so we have toured a lot more than they wound up touring. So for us, there's a Band of Brothers thing. I mean, I just assume that our values come from the same place, right? They come from thinking about what don't we like in the world and what can we think about doing, or presenting that might be a corrective to that in some way, right? I don't know if musically, there's that much I could attribute. Because again, most of what I do is I play music live. I try to bring 100% to the stage. I care really deeply about it. I care a lot about the audiences that come in. I've only seen Propaganda live once at Harvest of Hope Festival down in Florida, which was fucking great. but yes, I don't know what I could ascribe to Propaganda's influence. Because we're road horses. We normally are out there for months and months every year, and this is what we do. So Propaganda's model as a band is quite different from ours. I like to be constantly releasing a snapshot of where we're at. Right? Mm-hmm. I'm not a perfectionist. I mean, I hope what I'm presenting is always as good as it can be, and I work very hard to make it that. But I also want to be putting the work out there because it might help somebody. It might be what somebody needs. I know enough people have expressed gratitude for it that anything I do, maybe we'll find somebody who needed it at that time. So I want to make as much as I can, reasonably. I want to be putting it out there and getting it out before that moment has passed and I'm on to something else. Where I think Propaganda is a lot more like like Scott Walker or somebody like they don't want to get the record out until they're 100% certain that is the statement they want to make, that expresses clearly what they were trying to do, and they're not in a hurry. I think they have a lot more ambivalence about being in the business than I do. Whereas for me, it's like, this is what I'm good at. This is what it is. It's very much for me. It's a job and it's labor, and that's a whole shtick that I have. That I think people don't think of art as labor, and so they think of it as a pastime or somehow not as legit work. Whereas for me, once it started paying, I'm like, cool, you got a job. Work like you have one. Put 8-hour days into it. And that's what I do.
All right, John, I just have one more question. So if someone who wasn't really familiar with punk or metal read the lyrics, I think a lot of the references they wouldn't really get. So do you think the song says something more than just about, something for angry punks and angry metalheads? Does it say something more about, universal about the human experience?
Well, I mean, I think the thing is, scenes, like when we talk about the scene is a microcosm of the world, right? It's not actually just the scene, right? You see scene politics at every job you ever hold, right? You see scene politics at school. You see scene politics everywhere you go, right? What makes them frustrating in the scene is that you went to the scene to get away from all that other shit, right? It's like you found the punk scene and you went, now we have a place that is cool, right? Except there was a cartoon in the 70s. What the fuck was it called? It was like Yogi Bear and Huckleberry Hound, all the Hanna-Barbera guys, and they were on. Oh, it was called Yogi's Ark, right? Do you ever see this?
Yeah. Back in the day.
So Yogi's Ark, the whole theme of it was that they were looking for the perfect place, right? They're leaving Earth because it's too polluted, right? And so every new planet they go to, they think it's perfect, and then it turns out it has a problem. And the lesson of the cartoon is like, wherever you go, you will find that it seems perfect at first, and then later it's not. And that's because people are everywhere, right? It's like, and that's the slow lesson. But so yeah. So when we talk about scene politics, we're talking about the Garden of Eden, right? About the loss of a vision of innocence and purity, because that's how it seems when you first get there. You go, oh fuck, here's some people who care about what I care about. Here's some people who like the kind of music that I like. Here's some people who, don't think it's so bad if I dress funky, if I have some other kind of dressing, except that as you learn more about the scene, you go, oh, but I am allowed to think this, but not this, right? Oh, I'm allowed to wear this, but not this, right? And all this, every scene forms its own strictures. That's a general message. But the beauty of the song, I think, especially coming when it did, is like it came out and it was sort of like, if you don't already know what we're talking about, that's really not our concern here. We are speaking to people who are already on board. We already know who's going to listen to this. So, and that's part of the beauty of propaganda is like they proselytize, but they're also not demanding that any new ears come in, although I do think actually musically the growth has been so spectacular in the 21st century that it's kind of shocking to me that it doesn't get better coverage within metal and stuff. It's like musically they've grown so much. I think as a guy who fucking loves less talk, but as Potency Limits happens, all this stuff happens, the music gets much more complicated, gets much more metallic, as we've all observed. And I mean, just in terms of having more to chew on instead of just to pump your fist and get amped, which is great too, right? But there's just so much more. I think Chris has never stopped growing as a player. I think he's been dedicated to that, and that's something. If you're a guy who gets over on words, they won't even talk about your playing. You can't pay people to talk about your growth as a player. They'll never do it, But he has. It's like he's grown as a writer, and I believe also it's co-writes. I think it's like working with the rest of the band, making it happen. I think that's actually been the story of Propaganda for the last 10, 12, 14 years.
Well, John, thank you so much for your insights and your love of this band. That's what we're here for, super fans talking about Propaganda and just giving them some props for everything they've done for listeners over the years and pushing themselves. So we're so delighted to have you on the show. It's just been awesome to have you here.
All right, excellent. Well, it's a real pleasure talking to you.
Hey, this is Lang from St. Louis, and one of the reasons Propaganda means so much to me, especially the album Let's Talk More Rock, is they were the first punk band that I listened to really talking openly about questioning your own sexuality, questioning societal gender norms and the way you were brought up. For me as a young person, hearing this kind of representation in the music that I was listening to it was so impactful. It really helped me understand that other people had gone through this questioning process. Other people were asking these things of themselves, and it really helped me feel a lot less lost and less alone. And that's just something that's stuck with me my whole life.
Hey guys, calling you all the way down south of the border from Mexico. Pretty much want to say propaganda has been, I don't know, with me like for 20-something years, 20-some years. And still, I mean, I don't know what to say, but I just saw it last year. Great fucking show. Fuck the Borders, my favorite song, so keep it up. Just a nice podcast. The ones you guys have, by the way. Thank you. Bye. Viva México, cabrones.
So, Greg,
Yes.
what was memorable about John's comments, interpretation, or thoughts on the band and the song Back to the Motor League?
It was amazing having John on the show. Just to have that chat with him. He packed in so much into 30 minutes. I loved his entire chronology of the punk scene in Southern California and how he was like sort of like on the peripheral of that scene, which really makes sense to me for why he loves this song Back to the Motor League so much, because this is a punk song sort of ripping on the punk scene, and John was like an outsider in Southern California watching the punk scene from the edges. So to me, this is like a natural thing for John Darnielle to like, as far as like the message of the song. I loved him talking about his love of Born Against. And then in 95, 96, like whenever I was like 12, 13 years old, living in Missouri, how John's life took him to Iowa. So he was living just a few hours away from me for, when I was in like middle school. And that's just so cool to me to think that dude and the earliest incarnations of the Mountain Goats were taking off when he was living just a few hours away from me. That's just amazing. I love the fact that the guy who showed him Propaganda is still friends with him to this day. I loved that. I'm still buddies with the people who I found out about Propaganda from. Like my friend Steve and I still chat on Facebook now and then. He's the guy who I took the CD off the coffee table from. I love that John's first song that he heard was apparently I'm a PC Fascist, and how he connected to the music initially because of his budding vegetarianism. That was so cool to see reasons why things latch on to people. Anyway, so John talked a lot about how primed he was for Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes, because there was such a long gap between records. And it was like a long time, like 5 years from Let's Talk to Empires. And I love his visceral enthusiasm for this song. Something else that jumps out to me is like, you can tell by the way that John talks that he is so interested in words in general, writing, the way that phrases are put together. He kept talking about how Chris strings phrases together. And you can tell that John is like a skilled wordsmith because he just like effortlessly talks about like the discussion of how Chris doesn't force syllables to bear stress and things like that. And that got me thinking about like exercises I've done in like my own classroom that like, lyricists might want to do. So like in high school, for example, an easy example is iambic pentameter. Like I'd have students do accented and unaccented discussions around iambic pentameter, which is like an easy example of the ways that, words are emphasized. So like a beat equals one syllable. So da in da-dum, just like your heartbeat. And then there's also feet in phrasing. So there's like a foot is a combination of two beats, like one strong stress and like the other one is weak. So da-dum or da-dum. And then like an iamb is a foot that has an unaccented syllable followed by an accented syllable. So you have da-dum, and then you add the pentameter, which is 5 iambic feet. So da-dum, 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 da-dum. So anyway, this is just this long rambling example, but this just got me thinking because of the way that John talks. And so, you can see the stressed, accented, and the unaccented pieces. And then that comes through in like spoken performances in like Shakespeare, like friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The way
Free language arts lesson today.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Like, so anyway, the way he says that just sounds like Chris Hanna was just going to say that anyway with his phrasing. is just so spot on, because Chris just makes it sound so simple. Like he's just like improvising all the things he's saying. It's so smooth and effortless, but it's not structured in the way that a lot of song lyrics are. So that was like so cool to hear John Darnielle, a writer whose work I immensely enjoy, his musical and his literary works, talking about why Chris Hanna inspires him as a lyricist. So that's just so awesome.
Yeah, an observation that I would not have been able to make with my skills and my knowledge set.
That's why having these guests is so amazing for these songs. Like you and I could get together and talk about these songs every single week, but with these guests that we're talking to, I feel like I'm learning so much and picking up on what a diverse group of people, the way, like diverse in the way they're thinking about these and the way that they're discussing the songs. It just really helps me elevate my own understanding of why these songs are special, because like, you know, I feel like I could always say, oh, this song rocks, man. But then to hear John Darnielle talk about Chris Hanna's phrasing skills just really elevates the whole thing. The last thing that I want to say about our interview with John is I can't believe he made me read the whole entire song.
I was laughing. I had to cover the microphone. I was laughing so hard at that. And Greg didn't want to keep it. And I texted him and said, no, that's such a genuine, pure, endearing moment where he's laughing and cheering and saying, yeah, keep going.
Yeah, keep going.
I lost my mind as that was happening.
I was totally going to take it. I was like, oh, and I was like, so it wasn't even a thing to me. I said to Keith in a text message, oh yeah, and we'll take that part out where I read the whole song. He's like, what?
No way.
So Keith revolted, and he made me leave in the idea of me leaving in the entire thing where I read the entire song.
You're welcome, people.
Yeah, hopefully you all like that, because I was like just totally willing to just snip that out because it wasn't even a big deal to me. John's like, oh yeah, read it. And then I started reading it, and he's like, oh yeah, keep going. And I was like, holy moly. So then I got to the end of the song just about, and then he goes into his discussion of Amy Grant Mosh Cruise and how much he loves Amy Grant. And I was losing my mind. Yeah. So we left that in because Keith made me. So anyway, Keith, what do you think about our chat with John? Because I know that was a super special moment for you.
This is a band that I've only discovered within the last maybe 7 or 8 years, really, and a really important band to a lot of people. And it's clear why. I think if you dissect the lyrics, if you listen to the emotion, the storytelling, the human experiences that are at the core of so many of their songs, there's something that you can connect with other people to say, oh yeah, this band's really amazing, and share your favorite songs or whatever. So to be able to talk to someone that I really look up to as a storyteller, and as you said, like a wordsmith, right, was just a super cool experience and a fortunate experience. And I think my favorite idea that maybe he shared was moving from scene to scene, looking for something better, comparing it to that Hanna-Barbera cartoon, in which, there is no better planet. We need to fix up what we have. That, I think, certainly was not an analogy I would have thought of on my own, but that idea, I think, does reflect the song. And it also reflects so many bigger problems, with humans, with the environment, but with also how we treat one another, and trying to make what we have around us better, more inclusive, more empathetic and understanding. I just thought that was a really great description.
Do you have any super standout, like, favorite Mountain Goats song?
White Cedar.
Yes. Tell me why.
The piano, it's a super mellow, dialed back track. I think on the surface, I had to read a little bit about what the lyrics mean. And if I remember correctly, John was working or volunteering at either a home or a hospital where people were disassociated from reality. And the lyric that really stands out to me is, you can't tell me what my spirit tells me isn't true, can you? His ability to find meaning in so many either specific experiences, like his own personal experiences, good or bad, if it's from, an abusive childhood, or for the love of professional wrestling and role-playing games. I think that he can find the beauty in just about anything and pull that out and kind of shine a light on it. That's what I think, well, why I like this band so much, even if it's not what I normally listen to. It kind of cuts through, and it doesn't matter if something isn't heavy. You know, I like to share a song sometimes and say, not all heavy music is heavy. And this is a perfect example of not all heavy music being heavy.
Yeah, man, my favorite Mountain Goat song is Hast Thou Considered the Tetrapod from Sunset Tree? And it's absolutely heavy. Listen to these, like my favorite lines in that song by John are, "And alone in my room, I am the last of a lost civilization, and I vanish into the dark and rise above my station." And then his stepfather, who was, or the antagonist in the song, who was passed out drunk on a recliner or something, says, "But I do wake you up, and when I do, you blaze down the hall and you scream. I'm in my room with my headphones on, deep in the dream chamber, and then I'm awake and I'm guarding my face, hoping you don't break my stereo because it's the one thing I couldn't live without." Oh, so to have the guy who wrote those lines in those two songs that we just talked about on our podcast, talking about what he likes about Chris Hanna as a lyricist, it's surreal.
We're lucky. We're very lucky.
Yeah. So I'm just thrilled to be able to have that conversation recorded like forever. So anyway, should we go in and chat a little bit about the lyrics of this song?
Let's talk about it.
What are some of your favorite things about this song that jump out lyrically? Or wait, should we talk about what a motor league is first?
What is a motor league?
I'm glad you asked, because I was doing some digging on the Motor League, and a very kind listener named Sam Thompson, who is the host of Witch Police Radio, a 500-plus episode podcast run out of Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, home of Propagandy, was super kind, and he sent to me some details on the Motor League, which is featured in this song. And so just for anybody who doesn't know, Witch Police Radio, great podcast. I've been listening to it the last couple of weeks as Sam and I have been in touch. An episode of the podcast of his that I'm enjoying right now, which is Propagandy adjacent, is with Ryan Nash, who plays in the band Agassi, who is now bandmates with The Beeve and Derek Hogue. And Derek used to work for G7 Records. Sam sent some notes in, and he told me about the Motor League, and this is what he said. Says the Manitoba Motor League, which began as an enthusiasts club created for the betterment of motoring conditions, was formally incorporated in 1918. The Manitoba Motor League lobbied various levels of government for the rights of motorists, for improvement and maintenance of roads, for unified signage on streets and highways, for vehicle inspections, and for driver and pedestrian safety training. The league published maps, offered roadside assistance programs, and certified repair facilities. Its publications included the Manitoba Motorist and Going Places. The league began in 1904 as the Winnipeg Automobile Club, and in 1993 changed its name to CAA Manitoba to mark its long affiliation with the Canadian Automobile Association and AAA from the U.S. So Sam went on to say that he worked there briefly when he was, just one of his jobs that he's had over the years. And he says that what he mostly did was answer emergency road service calls, which is difficult in a place like Manitoba, where it's in the wintertime frequently minus 40 outside. And, he would have to tell people that it's going to be like 6 hours sometimes before we can get to you.
Yeah.
In the middle of the winter to get a car boosted, which is, you'd imagine somebody might be waiting in minus 40 and they wouldn't take that information very well. But, he says that it's a kind of a transient workforce and that there's a lot of students who do it because the phone gig is easy, flexible, and well paid. So he says that based on the lyrics of the song, Chris probably worked for the Motor League's travel agency, which in Winnipeg these days is in a building right behind the one where the call center was. And they, highlight triptychs and they help people with like map navigation. So it's basically like the American version of AAA. So that is what I was able to find out on the Motor League.
I always thought it was like a convenience store. That was my assumption.
Yeah. So that's what I found out on Motor League. So Back to the Motor League is like, basically Chris leaving the punk rock world and going back and working at his, working at a day job where he's like helping people like print out maps for like long distance road trips and stuff like that.
Yeah, there are so many references in musical and personal references in this song. I think some are obvious, some are really obscure, like I didn't pick up on that. And they're all coupled with this scathing sarcasm and wit. There's almost too much to talk about in this track. Right from the get-go, I like to party fucking hard. I like my rock and roll the same. Don't give a fuck if I burn out. Don't give a fuck if I fade away.
Yeah.
So I don't read that as literal. I don't see the band going for this go for broke rock and roll party attitude. They're not like this kind of cliche rock and roll experience. They want to create change and the opportunity to be better and to do better. But fading away into obscurity at a menial job would be maybe better than having to wade through like the scene politics, the fickle trends, macho posturing and extreme music, and pressure from both fans and record executives to fit a mold.
And just a little pop culture extension off of that exact line, about fading out or fading away, burning out. It's a reference to one of Manitoba's. I don't know if he was born there, but like I know that he's claimed in Manitoba. But Neil Young, the song "Hey Hey My," where he says "My Hey Hey, rock and roll's here to stay. It's better to burn out than fade away," which Kurt Cobain also cited in his suicide note.
Oh, wow. I did not know either of those things.
Yeah. So we have a little bit of a connection to other songs, another song by Neil Young, but also to a reference that Kurt Cobain wrote in his suicide note.
And I think that line that comes like not long after the intro, once thought I drew a lucky hand.
Oh, yeah.
Turned out to be a live grenade. I think that's there are so many lyrics, but I think it's my favorite because one, it's incredibly visual, but it's such a creative metaphor as well. So I kind of see this as maybe getting signed to a record label and becoming a touring band around North America, also around the world. Sounds great to those unfamiliar with the music industry and music scenes. So much of counterculture, punk, metal, or whatever gets overshadowed by the identities and the labels that people take on, sort of forcing the rebels and the misfits and the outcasts into groups that all think the same. So I think oftentimes people, especially young people coming into a music scene, they're trying to find out who they are. They're trying to create an identity separate and unique from what's been passed on by family or shaped by their geography or their community. And the identity ends up being more important than maybe the music. And this song almost reads like a diss track. Someone who is into anarchist punk and progressive politics for a little while, and maybe Christian metalcore bands that are fighting people in the mosh pit, or straight edge bands. Everyone with an image that seems maybe to be a little bit more about groupthink than about the music or challenging the bigger things that this band perhaps believes need to be challenged.
Yeah, I love that line too. Once thought I drew a lucky hand, turned out to be a live grenade. And to me, this is Chris saying that he felt lucky, like he was maybe lucky that he found punk, because on the surface, with bands like Dead Kennedys or SNFU or Bad Religion, it seems super smart. And like everybody would be there for the intellectual component of it, which Propaganda, Dead Kennedys, Bad Religion totally are. But then he discovered the inherent bro culture as well, which was probably around him the entire time when the band was forming, because they were a band for a long time before they got to How to Clean Everything, before they got to Less Talk More Rock. But then he discovers it, and instead of like ignoring it, it was like, oh God, this is really bad. I thought that I was in this with people who were like super curious, intelligent, thoughtful, kind, compassionate, equality oriented people, and they're just not. it seems to have taken Chris quite a long time to come to terms with the fact that a lot of the people that he was surrounded by just aren't moved by ideas and instead just want to pump their fists in the air and mosh. So I think that, I mean, obviously I can't speak for him, but it's like he was like almost like living in denial for the first 7-8 years of the band. And then Let's Talk More Rock. Then he started calling all those people out. Then now I feel like it's elevated that even more so. Do you know what I mean?
What Propaganda seems to view as the heart of punk music and punk culture, if that's, I don't know if you could really even say that, is maybe questioning what you've been taught in school or what the government says or the values that you're forced to believe. When you have like this massive group of people with the same fashion, with the same taste, with maybe a desire for like a social club more than forward thinking and inclusiveness, it kind of maybe ruins that scene quite a bit.
Yeah, and like John Darnielle said, Propaganda is really good at making music that sounds like it would appeal to the hulking bros, but whose lyrics are directed squarely in their direction.
Yeah.
This song is like, to me, like it's a natural continuation from their approach on Let's Talk More Rock of directly pointing criticism in the faces of the people who were likely standing in the room with them. And that's something that Propaganda's always been really, really good at, is like almost like trying to get the audience to turn on them. Like I've watched videos of them where they're in cities, like in like Sydney, Australia, and they'll be like, oh, this is a horrible city. Melbourne's so much better. And they'll like totally insult everyone in the room and say that the other city is like way better. And, they seem to have this like hilarious tendency that most people in the room will be able to laugh about, but that like 50 people in that room are like furious that they or you know what I mean? Like legitimately people will be like, boo, but they're taking it in stride, but that there's a subset of people in that room that were like absolutely furious that they would rip on their city and say that the other city is better.
Specifically probably targeting just those few people because they know they're going to get a rise out of them.
Yeah. And Todd is so funny about it too. And he'll just hammer it over and over and over. And it's just a riot. So, that's one of the reasons why I'm so glad that Todd's in the band, is that he's just such a hilarious guy as well. There's a bunch of other lyrical references in here as well. So this song also refers to some Dead Kennedys songs, Triumph of the Swill and Chicken Conformist, as well as the year that the album Bedtime for Democracy came out. So Back to the Motor League lyrics say 15 years later, so reeks of swill and Chicken Conformist. And Dead Kennedys songs and Propaganda track concern the co-opting of punk ideology by the corporate record industry. So 1986 plus 15 equals 2001, the year of the release of Today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes. So that's kind of cool as well to see those references to other tunes, because then you go back and you listen to those and you're like, hey, I found some you go back and you reappreciate things that are old, or a lot of people hear Dead Kennedys for the first time now today.
Yeah, and I think Chicken Shit Conformist is basically lyrically this same song, but removed of all of those obscure references, just an essay that talks about how punk's not dead, it just deserves to die, and explain how this movement or this culture has been co-opted by people who care more, about money, and they care more about fashion, and they care more about stage diving and having a good time versus actually like challenging positions of power.
John Darnielle also mentioned something else. So the line "fist in the air" cracks me up. To me, that is a funny line. So like, people who talk about like scene politics are obviously in the scene. So the notion of a singer asking people to throw their fists in the air cracks me up, because I know why bands do that. Like, they want to energize us. They want to know the crowd is, quote unquote, with them. Are you with us, Pittsburgh? You know what I mean? But it's also such a standardized approach to shows that I've personally experienced like a million times. So like, I actually appreciate it when a band like completely doesn't even acknowledge the audience. Like Laura Jane Grace from Against Me, like back in the day, was so good about like standing sideways and not even looking at the audience and not talking between songs. And I absolutely loved stuff like that. I was like, yeah, you we're not even here. We don't matter at all. Just like I thrived on it, because so many bands would be like, come on, circle pit, or fists in the air. And to me, when a band ignores the audience, that is just so perfect. So like Propaganda used to have an old Twitter bio that springs to mind now, where they said they were the North Korea of punk.
Right.
And that resonated with me so much because they've done everything they could to satirize the punk scene over the years. And that's like a huge reason why I love them so much. They've never asked me to do something like throw my fists in the air. They've only ever asked me to try to be a smarter person. And like, that is just so awesome to me to realize that they've never asked me to do something cheesy. They've only ever asked me to, I have my reaction to their music. They don't need to ask me to do anything. They just let me have it, which I love.
Yeah, the fist in the air also is very sarcastic. Like, fist in the air, we're all sheep. It's all just kind of paint by numbers. Whenever the breakdown part or the stage dive part happens, we know what to do because we're a crowd and we're just here for that. But in a way, sort of meta, I think, since it matches what they're making fun of. And another line, the straw men you build up to burn.
Oh yeah,
so many punk and metal and hardcore bands, right? They have these lyrics that are focused on virtue, about being different, about being better than what's maybe celebrated in popular culture. But of course, people are fallible and people make mistakes and people are flawed. So I interpret that line as like, don't put your stock in the band, singing these words or screaming these ideas. Sometimes they're self-righteous and they're self-congratulatory. Put your energy instead in ideas and principles and do your best to actually create positive change.
Yeah. And I was thinking about how much garbage Propaganda had to endure, most likely from crowds over the years in the first couple of records, and probably through Empires as well. I was thinking about all the ways that they would talk to the audience between songs, how the lectures are, notoriously longer than the music that was performed. And, a listener in Australia named Adam Newman wrote to us recently after listening to some episodes. And he told me about Chris getting heckled relentlessly between every single song when he saw them in 1997, and how Adam remembers people in the audience, talking about the band outside, are they a gay band? And what's with all the religion hate and stuff like that? People were talking about the band in super negative ways, out on the sidewalk during smoke breaks and stuff like that. And so this song, Back to the Motor League, says we're back and we are still going to push all your buttons and we are going to thrash you relentlessly with our brand new riffs.
Yeah. And I think something that I've overlooked from the band's earlier discography is the introspection and self-reflection that I think is really obvious on Victory Lap. But it's also there in the earlier albums. And I think I'm only starting to make those connections where, Chris is open with his struggle with either personal mistakes or things he said, or running his mouth too recklessly, and these flaws that are strewn throughout their discography. Like the line, "It reminds me of my own race to redress my own sad history of mouth feet," having to put his foot in his mouth for all the dumb things that he said. And there are just so many words and ideas and lyrics in the song. It's easy to overlook that part where it's I've not been right. I think I've been right a lot, but I'm not always right.
Yeah, and the line "drunken brawls" really stands out to me as well. I can't really picture Chris getting into drunken bar fights. I mean, but he's also in a totally different time in his life now. But seriously, I mean, that's heavy stuff. There was another line that I really liked as well. So Back to the Motor League with me before I'm forced to face the wrath of the well-heeled buying public reminds me of the book So You've Been Publicly Shamed by John Ronson, about internet shaming culture. I'd imagine that internet shaming and bullying, particularly in old school AOL chat rooms, was going strong back in those days. It has perpetuated at warp speed since then, which may account for Chris's lyrics on the song Status Update from Failed States as well. Thinking about that, facing the wrath of the public for all these things and these ideas, and like saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, and just being totally chastised and ostracized for it is something that is absolutely everywhere in our society now. Do you have any specific things about the musical performance of this song that really stand out besides the fact that it totally friggin' slays?
Saying meta is maybe overused, but I really think that fits here. It's a raging piss and vinegar ripper. It gets the crowd moving every time they play it. I think
100% guarantee.
I've seen them 3 times and they've played it every time. People are circle pitting, they're singing along, their fists in the air while making fun of the people who are there for the music and not the message. But I'd wager probably by the time that this song was recorded, and certainly by now, those people have like long fallen off attending their shows. Like the people who are there for just the party, for the scene, for the social part of it. Though I will say, when I saw him in 2007, there was a dingus in the crowd in Chicago basically yelling, "Shut up and play already." So even that late, there are people not wanting to hear what they have to say, promoting ideas, promoting books, trying to share a little bit of a context and background information before a song. So, pretty recently, people are, and I'm sure it still happens now, but the last 2 shows, I can't think of anything like that.
Man, and it's so boring when people yell that.
Yeah.
It's so boring.
They turn on each other, the crowd. And I very clearly remember someone turning and telling the guy to shut up.
Yeah.
Which I wasn't going to do. It's good to see, other people kind of stepping up when that happens.
Yeah. That reminds me of like when I saw David Cross here in Buffalo about a year and a half ago. He was doing this bit where he ends his recent sets, which I think you can see on Netflix now, but like he has this bit where like Ron Perlman fights Donald Trump. And so I saw David Cross do that live, and this guy in the back row was like, "You just took a dump on the president, man. That is so horrible." And David Cross basically turns to him and says, "Have you seriously never heard a word I've said beyond playing Tobias on Arrested Development?
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Anything at all, ever?" Like, so now at this point, like if you show up to Propaganda songs and you're like, "Shut up and play," like you just sound like the most boring person on earth to me. I mean, that's just my impression of it.
Are you aware of what John Hinckley was actually arrested for? As if like they're not familiar, or the message has somehow eluded them. But yeah, I think this musically, again, it's a great example of how successful this band is at linking their lyrics with the music. There's so much rock and roll attitude, but it's not perpetuating that banal, like, let's party sort of rock and roll attitude. It's directed inward at punk and the music scene itself.
And himself.
Which I think right. And I think that makes the song really smart. It makes it funny. Knowing this one, I probably, except for that very last fast part at the end, I could probably sing by memory the majority of the song, and there are still things that I'm picking out that I maybe didn't make a connection with before.
I went back and I watched some videos of them performing this song, and they have modified this song over the years live a little bit, which I love when bands do that, because it re-injects a little bit of like some new creativity into like a long release song with some live alterations that kind of throws the audience for a loop, and they're like, "Whoa, that's not on the record. I can't believe they did that. That was so cool." So I like when bands do that, and I just like, I'm a sucker for it. I fall for it every time. So like on the live version, after the line "drunken brawls," possibly referring to Chris's own missteps in his youth, like I said, they developed like a sort of like new interlude when Beav was in the band, like leading into the last minute of the song, which is like pretty cool. So then they come back in with the fist in the air part, and the section that reads, "I guess life is just a popularity contest of success, just ability to perform within a framework of obedience. Just ask the candy-coated Joy-Cam rock band selling shoes for venture capitalists, silencing competing messages, rounding off the jagged edges." That is so good. But on the record, he's like singing it like he's singing 2 things at once on the recording. Back to the Motor League, and he holds that note while singing that life is just a popularity contest. So anyway, in the live version, to capture my attention, Chris doesn't even come back in the singing until Just Ask the Candy Coated Joy Can Rock Band.
Yeah.
So like he has this strategy of like pulling off the song through some unplayable parts, and like they transitioned it to a slightly teeny tiny little bit of changes in the live setting so that it comes off very well, but also makes it playable in over those parts that are like overlapping.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to adapt a pretty ridiculous nonstop song to be able to play it live. And I just think musically, that opening riff with like the little hammer on and then the bend, it adds so much. I mean, if you watch a video of someone maybe learning to play the song on guitar, maybe they're sharing what they've learned so far, and they have like the chords down, but not the small details. You'll hear what I mean, how much those two things, like the hammer-ons and the bends, add to this, and how later on, kind of under, I guess it's a verse, the riff stays the same, but it slows down. It picks up again with some ringing notes before speeding back into like, being thrashing again. And it has like that great thrashy punk feel with all of the palm muting under like the mouth, feet, eating heads. And I think just that variation of taking that very rock and roll, almost like a classic rock riff, and switching it up and adding all of these different features to it. And of course, what have we here? That part's like a rallying cry, right? The riff really simplifies. It cuts out all the bends. It cuts out the hammers, any flair added to it. And you just have like this pulsing sing-along that overtakes the high voltage, bouncy energy that's in the rest of the song. And then you just shaking your fist and making fun of something collectively that we're all a part of.
I know it's like, and then it got that drum beat, like, and then so it just naturally makes everybody want to put their fists in the air, but they're making fun of all of us with our fists in the air at the exact same time. It's utterly perfect. One thing I'm really curious about Todd is I don't know how much Todd played bass before he joined this band. He was the guitar player in I Spy, and so he's great on these songs. And I'm curious, and I'm sure we'll hear about this now that I've said this. Like, I'm curious if anybody out there has any knowledge of Todd's experience as a bass player before he joined Propaganda, or if this was just like we know you're the right person, personality wise, taste wise, to be in this band. I know you play guitar and you're good at guitar. Are you willing to learn this new instrument so that you can join this, so that we can have this perfect lineup? So, did you find any good YouTube comments?
I have a couple.
I got a couple also.
One is, I guess life is just a popularity contest. And I think that kind of boils down this song, right, to that one single line that fits not just punk, but politics and
reality show like president.
Our social connections and how we see ourselves, whether it's tethering our personal value to how many likes we get on social media. So I think that line, boom, it takes this almost essay of a punk anthem down to that single line, and I think it works.
Yeah, I've got one that says, I love how they try to do their very best to get the crowd to turn on them. Propaganda rule. Another one is, this song has caused me to drive way too fast, which is utterly true for, I bet, everybody who has ever played this in their car.
Another comment I saw also about a car says, this song has been on a CD in my car since 2003. Different car now, but same CD.
Sweet.
Respect.
Nice.
Shout out to that guy.
Heck yeah, man. Did you do you have any like big takeaway lessons about Back to the Motor League that sort of stand out to you?
I think in exploring new groups, scenes, and subcultures, I personally had to kind of play act for a while to try out a few different versions of me.
Yeah.
How I wanted to be as an individual. Sometimes was also like acting and dressing and talking and sounding like everyone else. So maybe at first defining myself by something else's opposite, but that's also, I think, a part of growing up, and it's not all bad. And along the way, it's important to question and to think for yourself and to be yourself. So for me, as someone who's approaching 40, as a teacher, I want to encourage my students as they're looking to find out who they are, but also to kindly remind them that who they are is bigger than the fashion that's connected to, their friend group or the music they like, or whatever identity that they're currently trying out now, and to encourage them to find themselves, but also help them and foster them to think bigger as well, and not to necessarily belittle those things.
Yeah, and that's a message that will take a long time to sink in. It's not going to be something that they're going to immediately have a massive epiphany and say, "Whoa, you're totally right." But that's the kind of lesson, the big picture thing, that comes back later, often after some possibly regrettable life choices, where you're like, where those moments kind of come back to you, and you're like, "Huh, what that teacher of mine said that one time, it makes a little more sense now."
Yeah, I mean, because it wasn't that long ago that your co-host here had quite a few Insane Clown Posse t-shirts hanging in the closet in middle school, and quite a few embarrassing CDs. If you check Twitter, I did a thing where every
Loved that
I got, I shared in an album that I'm, jokingly embarrassed to say that I previously owned, but I don't really care. It's funny.
Yeah.
So yeah, tastes change and things change, but I don't know, like, encourage people to find things, but don't be a jerk about it. But also, just some things do suck. But you don't have to be mean about it.
Yeah. To me, this song's about sort of like being a square and trying to hammer yourself into a round hole. It's about coming to grips with not being accepted within a place where you at one point thought that you would belong. I think about that. I think about all the times I've wanted to be liked in the world. How hard I have often gone out of my way to get people to like me, and how lonely I've still felt even in all these times where I've put in all this effort. Like, so for example, I currently live in Buffalo. I'm not from here. I used to live in Missouri, and I don't have many friends here, and I've been here 2 years, and I'm glad I'm here. But going somewhere new in your mid 30s is super hard to do. So do I want to move back to Missouri? I mean, not really, but it's also hard to feel like I'm missing a crew of great friends in Buffalo who would just call me up and be like, "Hey, come over," just because they want me around. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to make friends like that kind of friend when you're 35, 36, 37 years old. So like all those people who might call me up live crazy far away. And it's making me think about, what is my back to the Motor League? Where is back? What is the Motor League? What am I going back to? What would I be settling for?
Yeah.
It's like going out into the big wide world only to find out just how hard it can be. And, that's a sort of a little more personal aspect of what this song now means to me compared to something different. Back when it came out, it was just like a fist in the air, rager.
Right.
But it has me a little nostalgic at the moment.
That's a great thought experiment. Now I'm thinking about what my Motor League is too.
Yeah, where would you go back to? You know what I mean? It's just something to ponder. What would you rate this bad boy?
It's obvious. This is a 5. I think this is technically the 4th song I ever heard, because it was the first album I bought and I just listened in order. Clearly the first one to where I was like, wait, what was that? And I had to go back and listen again. I think this song is really smart. It could maybe be interpreted as being mean-spirited from someone unfamiliar with, music and punk and kind of subcultures, but it addresses people in these scenes that take themselves way too seriously and think about themselves too highly. I think it's sharp and it's witty. It has lyrics that are like poignant and other times kind of silly and absurd. The music is just like a punk rock, thrashing anthem. I think it's a 5 for sure.
It's also a 5 for me. Pretty obvious. I think that there are 5 5s on this record. For me. So I think I'm going to rate 5 of the tracks from today's Empires, Tomorrow's Ashes as a 5, as my tentative thoughts. As I was looking at the track listing today, I was like, oh my God, I think there's 5 5s on this album. Yeah, so this is one of them. It's 5 out of 5. That is our episode. Thank you so much for listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda, hosted by Greg and Keith. Hello. You can find us on Instagram at PropagandaPod or on Twitter at PropagandaPod. Thank you to the moon and back, to our guest, John Darnielle from the Mountain Goats. Man, what a guy. So glad he's here. Can't believe he said yes. I feel so lucky. So anyway, everybody go check out John's books and his records. It's just endless, the great amount of things that he has put into the world. So we will be back next week with another song. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda, is created, hosted, and produced by Keith Goff and Greg Soden. Musical clips on this show are composed and performed by Propaganda. Artwork on the show is by Justin Santora, who can be reached at justinsantora.com. You can find us on Twitter at PropagandaPod and on Instagram at PropagandaPod. If you like the show, please drop a rating on your podcast app of choice and subscribe to receive future episodes. Tell your friends. Thank you so much for listening.